Good boy. Oh my God, we already have a super chat. How very exciting.
Oh my
Hello,
goodness.
fine people in chat. Hope you're doing well. I hope you're having a fine Spooktober so far. We're going to talk about another scary movie today, but this time we have some very special guests, which is very exciting. They're back, Fringy and Rags. How are you both doing?
I'm doing A-okay. I'm good. I'm all right.
That's very good
Tired,
to
but
hear.
I'm good.
What was that, Fringy?
I'm tired, but I'm good.
That's allowed. You're allowed to be tired. Today
That's why
we're
we
going
got
to be
this talk
talking about a new indie horror movie. Isn't that exciting? A nice low budget indie horror movie. No famous actors, no famous studios making it. It's a little horror movie about a dog. How very exciting. I couldn't find anything about the budget for this movie reliably, but I imagine it was pretty cheap based on the movie itself. And it's made already almost $4 million. So that's looking pretty good for a movie like this.
That is good.
Yeah. So, before we get into the movie at all, I just wanted to dedicate this stream to Hassan's dog, Free Kaya. And
I just saw your the image you've got on screen there.
Just a little dedication to Kaya. We support Kaya here, and we wish Kaya the best. Get out of there. Before we jump into anything further, we already have a super chat. Daily Dose, thank you very much. Says the kiss of the Spider-Woman might be this year's Emilia Perez. At least this time, Diego Luna gets to be based for most of the movie. It's Oscar bait. So I'm probably I assume the only person on the panel that has heard of Kiss of the Spider-Woman. Is that true?
I've heard of it, but I don't really know anything about it.
You told me you saw it.
Yes, well, that's true. I did. It's a new musical, and I'm always, interested in musicals because old musicals used to be really, really good, and we haven't had a good one in 20 years at this point. So I'm always excited about the prospect of a movie musical that's actually pretty decent. And I watched the trailer for Kiss of the Spider-Woman, and it was very bright and colorful, which is a good start. But the movie sucks. I wouldn't say it's quite as funny as Emilia Perez, but I can see why you think that it's similar. I basically wouldn't recommend the movie to anyone. So,
what about are you gonna see that Bruce Springsteen biopic that's coming out soon?
Well,
I gotta tell you, man, I find it so lame that it just seems like a lot of people think that a shortcut to getting an Academy Award is to do a biopic on a musician.
That is a particular pet peeve of mine.
Because a complete unknown, it's like, dude, this is fine. It's not, it's okay. I don't know that this deserves an Academy Award, but all right. It didn't get one, but it was nominated.
Celebrities are often, I find, very impressed by other celebrities doing impressions of other celebrities. So but
it's always musicians. Why isn't it? Why didn't the Tetris movie get nominated for an Academy Award? That was a really good movie, but it's about video game stuff. So we don't really care about musician. Oh yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with that necessarily. It's just funny as a trend.
The basic problem I have with basically every musician biopic is that okay, but the person you're making a movie about was a really talented musician in most cases, or they had something very special and unique about them, which is why they're so famous. And we're going to get an actor to do an okay SNL level impression of them. It's I'd rather just go listen to any artist that you're going to make a movie of. I can't think of many that really have interesting enough lives to justify the whole movie. It definitely can happen. But if the reason you want me to watch this movie is because I like the music, I'd just rather go listen to the music. I don't want to hear Rami Malek do an impersonation of Freddie Mercury. All right? Freddie Mercury, he's a bit hard to imitate. He's maybe a bit too good for this.
There's meant to be 4 Beatles movies coming out, right?
You're right. There's going to be 4 of them.
That definitely feels I feel like we're taking the piss here. Okay, we're doing 4 biopics on the Beatles.
I think I might only go watch the Ringo one because I feel like the Ringo one
that'll be
might
the
be
interesting
best.
one, wouldn't it? Yeah,
that'll be the one that actually is like, I'm just trying to play me drums.
Exactly, because you watch any clip or any sort of footage of like the Beatles in the studio, they're arguing and like, you know, goofing around, and Ringo's just sitting behind the drum set waiting for everyone else to get back to work.
Get their shit
Just
together
sitting
so he
there.
can sit there and bang out a riff,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, I don't know how a whole Ringo movie would work, but you know, I'll check that one out.
Yeah, the Springsteen movies, the one thing that I find kind of encouraging about it is that it's apparently focused specifically on him making one album, so it shouldn't be a big sprawl
The whole life
of
story,
his whole life
yeah.
story, which is always kind of encouraging, because that's one of the things that I really don't like about biopics, is that they try to do too much and, you know, get all the famous moments together, and they sort of eliminate any real, you know, 2.5 hour, because it's going to be 2.5 hours regardless, but 2.5 hour
Every
narrative,
movie,
yeah, that you.
this one is only 2 hours actually.
Oh,
so
hey, you know what? That's
Sounds
another
like a little bit
encouraging
shorter.
side.
yeah.
I
It's hard to
suppose
find.
it is. Yeah.
It's hard to find anyone's life that has a consistent dramatic through line over their entire life. You know, if we focus on just their adulthood or just their career, maybe, you know, but if we're starting with them as a kid, you know, we see them like, you know, making it, and then once they're successful, it's like it's hard to find any consistent dramatic through line to make it not feel just like a series of vignettes the whole time. And that's always a bothersome aspect of these movies.
We have
Anywho.
another super chat from Chief 8. Thank you very much. Says, better or worse acting from a pup, Thing or Good Boy? I'm sure we'll hear about it. Yeah, I think we'll talk about that for sure.
I think we definitely will. We'll come right back to that. Before we jump too far into any spoiler details, as we should probably talk about whether, you know, what we think of the movie overall and whether we recommend it, because I think many people in the chat will not have seen this yet. So let's start with you, Fringy. What did you think of Good Boy?
I like it. I think it's good. I probably wouldn't say that it's great. I think it's got enough rough edges and sort of suboptimal execution of certain aspects of the filmmaking that I wouldn't go that far, but I think it's good. This is like the kind of movie that I want to see a lot more of. This is very much even though it's very low budget, it's very high concept in a way that I like. Very focused on achieving sort of one specific thing as a story, which I think it does pretty well. Thematically, I think it's really sound, and I'm fond of this movie. I like it. It's but like I said, I would say it's good, not great. But I would recommend it. I think that this is a film that most people would get something out of.
Is it the kind of movie you think people should check out before they watch a stream like this? Would spoiling it ruin it, I suppose, is the question.
If somebody asked me like directly, you know, should they watch it, I would probably say, yeah, go watch it. No one want to really talk about it with them.
Fair enough. Rags, what about you?
Not beforehand, that is. Obviously afterward.
I feel somewhat similar. I think it's a pretty good movie. It was enjoyable to watch. I think for the most part, it executes well on the sort of premise that they want to have, the horror movie from the dog's perspective. And I think a couple times they maybe show some stuff that they shouldn't. But I was never distracted by the dog's acting. I thought that it was neat to constantly have him looking around at things. And I liked a lot of the creative decisions they made in terms of not being like not showing people's faces very much, or just kind of having them wander around looking at stuff, being curious. But I like the mood. I like the tone of it. I don't think that it had too much in it that I would cut out. Maybe just a little thing here and there. A couple questionable decisions in terms of maybe some CGI that wasn't really needed. But overall, I feel quite positive about it. It was a good watch, and I would definitely recommend it to people. Certainly felt like it was a bit of a new take on a spooky movie that I definitely appreciate.
And if you haven't been convinced yet that it's worth watching, know that it's only 72 minutes long, so it's an easy, breezy watch, which is really nice. We've been covering a lot of the old Disney movies on this channel recently, and I love a good an hour 15-minute movie. It's great. It just flies by. I'm kind of sick of how many movies feel the need to be like 220 plus.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
It's definitely a case of, you know, I'd say this film doesn't overstay its welcome. It's lean, compared to, like you said, a lot of recent movies that are incredibly bloated.
Oh yeah. Hugh, what did you think of Good Boy, Good Sir?
I think The Boy was good, for sure. I took some issues with sort of what literally happens in the plot, and I think that kind of weighed it down a little bit for me. I think if we're gonna do this kind of horror movie, this is the way I would want it to be done. You know, it's nice and breezy, like we said. The dog is not distracting, and I think he's a lot of fun to look at. He's cute, and he hits his marks, and he does
he remembers his lines.
He remembers his lines, but I think what literally happens in the plot is a bit of a sticking point for me. I'm not a huge fan of how it was executed. I think the premise of a horror movie from the dog perspective could have been done in a way that I would find a little more interesting than what we got here. But overall, if you're looking for something to check out, I don't think it's not a colossal waste of time, because it's very short. So you can get it done, and I'd say check it out and form your own opinion about it for sure. But not my favorite.
As Trayvon Washington in the chat says, it's called Good Boy, not Great Boy. I like the elevator pitch of this movie a lot more than the execution itself. Though I wouldn't call it bad. Fringy, you mentioned that you thought it was thematically really sound, and I didn't get that impression, but I also don't think I really understood exactly what the movie was trying to say, or maybe I did and I didn't like it. I suppose we'll find out as we talk about it. I think the best part of the movie is obviously the dog. Indy, I believe, is the dog's name in real life and in the movie. Indy is a great doggo. I don't know if his performance is better than the dog in The Thing. That's a high bar, though. He certainly has more of the movie to command. And I think, that part of the movie is the best part. Anytime the human characters opened their mouths, I thought less of the movie. But every time they disappeared and we focused on the dog, or like running around and encountering spooky atmospheric situations, that was cool. I don't know if I love that. I shouldn't spoil it yet. What the main antagonist is for the dog to face was a little disappointing that it wasn't more tangible, I would say. But we'll get to it. I really admire that the movie basically succeeds in the main thing that it was trying to do. And it certainly helps that it's not too long, doesn't overstay its welcome. The dog is good, and I kind of like the atmosphere. Like the highlight for me is when the dog like runs straight at the thing pulling its chain and sends the whole doghouse toppling over. I like that sort of go-getter attitude that the main character of this movie has. He's certainly a lot more active and brave than most horror movie protagonists. So that was refreshing to see. But yeah, I think maybe once we talk about it, I might appreciate what it was going for more. I think primarily I'm very confused as to what literally happened in the movie. So we'll talk about it. But I think it's worth watching for sure. I like championing unique, low-budget indie movies. I think they're definitely worth watching. And I'm glad this movie exists. So go check it out if you haven't seen it already. I would say go watch the movie before watching this stream.
Yeah,
I think it's worth checking out. And
I think that knowing how it ends might affect the way that you perceive it from the beginning. So I think that you should definitely check it out first and then come back.
Yeah, the movie has a sort of a big reveal if you will. You're sort of meant to not quite understand what exactly is happening yet. So unlike Death Becomes Her, which we covered last week, which I think you can spoil but not spoil the experience of in the slightest, because it's just such a crazy movie that has to be seen to be believed. I think this one's better if you go in blind. So go away now if you don't want it spoiled. But yeah, so Good Boy, the basic premise of Good Boy is that a dog, who is a POV character for like 99% of the movie, is moving into a spooky old house in the woods with his owner, who appears to be suffering from a disease. It's not really specified. Some things online say that it's like a rare lung disease. You could believe that it's cancer. It's something along those lines. And spooky things happen in this haunted house where spooky things have happened to humans and dogs alike in the past. And as the movie progresses, Indy sees a lot of spooky things that may or may not be real. There's a lot of dog dream sequences in the movie, more than I was expecting there to be, that's for sure. And eventually we sort of come to terms with what this scenario actually is. That's the short version. It's a pretty simple, lean premise. I think it's, effective in that regard. But I think we should jump around a little bit instead of.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah,
I think so. The whole thing chronologically.
Yeah,
maybe
I don't think because like chronologically, there's really not like an order of scenes that it goes. I don't know if it would benefit really to discuss it in that way, right?
An interesting thing is talking about it chronologically might reveal, for instance, like what could be said to be one of the problems is that to some extent the spooky stuff can be a little bit repetitive.
Yeah.
It can be a little repetitive. I wouldn't say that it's exceedingly repetitive. I think that there's like a decent amount of variation in the nature of the spooky things that the dog sees and the dream sequences and sort of when they appear. And there's a level of deliberateness to the way that things are revealed that I appreciate. That it begins with just the dog looking at like a shadowy corner of the room for a while and wondering if there's actually something there or if it's just an illusion compared to how it starts to ramp up to the big spooky mud man. But there's a degree to which it's a bit repetitive that if you were just going scene by scene, describing it might sound like, well, this sounds a bit like dull. Be like, no. Like when you're watching it, it's fine. Like it's nice and spooky at times. But yeah, I think I would agree that I wonder if it might be worthwhile to, because I'm curious, Cap, that you said what do you think the film is about? Like what do you think its like big point is?
Okay, so I think I understand a bit. I hope I understand at least a little bit of what it's going for thematically. I'm still confused as to what literally happens. So what I think is happening thematically here primarily is that the dog's owner is suffering and dying of a disease, and essentially the dog is seeing supernatural visions and premonitions that his owner is going to die.
The horror, I guess the horror kind of comes from the perspective, the way that I got it is that the horror comes from the perspective of the dog not knowing what's happening, right? Like he can sense it, but he's not sure what it is. And so a lot of the spooks and scares come from his sort of like sixth sense, if you will, of like a dog who can detect the disease and knows it's coming, right? That's pretty much where it's coming from. And they kind of throw up, I would say, a little bit of a smoke screen for the house being haunted, because one of our chatters mentioned that he doesn't think the house is haunted. I don't think it actually is a haunting that's going on here, but they have a line earlier in the movie where the sister mentions that it's like the cursed family house, and so I think that's sort of meant to maybe pull your eye to the side a little bit until they make the big reveal at the end of what actually is going on. But I think that's what I got from it.
I would say my conclusion would be that the house, the idea that there's actually the house is haunted is a red herring. Like it's deliberately sort of because in and of itself, that can make for like an interesting film. The idea that the dog is in a house that's haunted, and that in and of itself is difficult for the dog to understand. But yeah, I would say it's basically a red herring. I think that there's a line in the film, which I would not want in the film, much like there would be a lot of dialogue that I would probably want to cut from the film, since I think that is the consistently weakest element of this film. There's two things. I think there's something that the sister says, and then there's a television show that he's watching that basically just explicitly says, dogs see things and sense things that humans can't see. And obviously that's like what the film is very much relying on, is that you're dealing with the dog's perspective that is going to be inherently different from a human's perspective in ways that might be a little bit difficult to understand or difficult to relate to, but that you can sort of figure out. Like the idea that the dog will see things that aren't real or almost have like these premonitions of what's going to happen. I would have been fine with no line of dialogue for that. Like, I would be totally fine with just people figuring it out. I feel like I figured it out relatively quickly. But I guess to tie it into is more the central theme. I think that it's totally correct that an aspect of the spooky things that are happening is a sort of a manifestation of is ill and sort of deteriorating. But I would say like a probably an even more important aspect of it is that the illness is changing his owner, like as a person, in a way that's like disconcerting and scary and hard for the dog to understand. I think important aspects of it are just that his owner starts to not treat him as well as time goes on, and that is like contributing to it, and that's essentially like the point that the film is making, is that the illness is destroying his owner, changing his owner into somebody that he doesn't recognize. And of course, the parallel with I believe it's his grandfather's dog, is essentially that Indy is in a position where, you know, like one of two fates is possible. Either he perishes with his owner, or he essentially decides to move on and continue with his life. Which of course is like, that's nice and poignant and tragic. But also it's like, hey, that's dogs, man. You know, they're loyal. They're loyal companions. But like, this is kind of the flip side of that, is that when the owner of the dog is starting to sort of wither away from an illness, that it's almost like trying to ground it in like how the dog might feel, and in seeing that happen, which I think like thematically and conceptually, I quite like as an idea for a movie.
I'll tell you, my experience of watching the movie was like, I had that idea that essentially what we're seeing, this mud man, this like abyss in human form that's getting closer and closer, and we're seeing a bit more of the man Todd. Is that his name?
Todd,
Todd, and he's being a bit more bipolar, for lack of a better word, because he's obviously not handling the fact that he's dying super well. He's isolating himself from his family, his sister especially, and he comes back presumably from getting some sort of blood treatment, chemo or whatever it is, and he's a bit more aggressively hostile to the dog because he just wants to be left alone. He's self-isolating and all that sort of stuff. I thought that's what was happening. And then something convinced me along the way that like, that's not what they were going for. I think it was the lack of any real like resolution for the guy. Like obviously this is from his perspective, the dog's perspective, but like I never really got any sort of like resolution of that problem, because someone mentioned that this is like a dog form of The Shining. And that's what I thought it was at first, and then something convinced me it wasn't, because it like Todd doesn't completely turn into the evil Mudman, essentially, where he gets to the point where he's so far gone that he's actually aggressively hostile to the dog, nor does he sort of come to the point where he realizes like, oh, I've been not treating you well. Like he doesn't get any real resolution of that problem. I don't know if that
I think maybe like there'd be a couple things to add on that. I think because obviously we're talking about spoilers, so Todd dies, and I think it's noteworthy that after several instances of being quite cold, distant, sometimes even aggressive towards Indy, that it's after he's died and essentially, I maybe you could say is like the physical aspect of this illness and what it's taking from him is gone. That like he is notably more compassionate towards Indy, and then when he realizes that he's dead and gets dragged down into the basement, and then of course he says, "Is you're a good boy, but you can't save me." I would say that those are meant to be the resolution to the storyline, the realization that control his fate. You know, this is the end for him.
For me, did you cut out for anyone else?
He cut out for me as well. So, but it was just a couple words.
I guess I'll just repeat. Yeah, so I would say that the resolution with those things in mind is essentially that there is a recognition that he hasn't treated Indy very well. The fact that he says that Indy is a good boy, I think, is essentially the admission, like, you've essentially given me everything that you can, and I appreciate it, but this is the end. And I don't want you to perish with me. So that I guess I would interpret that as something of a resolution. Like I said, I don't think it's because I think I understand what you're getting at when you say that you have a sort of problem with like what is literally happening. Because you know, Indy is found in the scary basement with the big spooky, you know, hallway that leads into the you know, into nothing. So
that Grandpa was digging.
Yeah. So it is kind of a thing of like, how did he end up down there? What was happening down there? And I think the film definitely relies a lot on the notion that because we're so grounded in the dog's perspective that you shouldn't assume that everything that's happening is literal, which I think it would also be fair to go like, well, hang on, but what is actually happening for real?
Yeah,
I think that's totally fair.
That's my biggest issue with the movie.
I think
just
that's
trying
as well. Yeah, is
that. Because I like the elevator pitch for this movie a lot. I would have liked a more tangible, concrete force of antagonism for the dog to face than a theme, if that makes sense.
So that's kind of how I feel. I appreciate the movie for what it is doing and what it's saying. And I don't have a problem with that if I'm being really analytical. But I'm the kind of guy who I wish it was a spooky monster.
Yeah.
But that is my preference. I'm not going to dock the film for it, but I was I really was kind of hoping that there was some kind of a supernatural force, some specter, some curse, some maybe family attached malicious spirit or something that the dog had to contend with. And it didn't even necessarily have to have a good ending. But I'm just the kind of guy who more prefers a kind of actual thing like that instead of a more thematic or maybe even a more secular kind of antagonist. It was a little bit of a disappointment to me, but that's just because that's the kind of thing that I prefer. I would have liked it if it really was something like that. Yeah. But I guess for what they were trying to do, I think they did, you know, a pretty good job of it. But I gotta admit, I'm a little bit disappointed that it was, you know, basically, you know, you can't save me from cancer or whatever. Which is, you know, sad and meaningful, but
I guess I could take or leave the supernatural element. This reminds me a bit, essentially, in terms of like kind of making not exactly the same point, but a similar point to Jurassic Park about the loyalty of dogs. I think that's like a big aspect of what the film is dealing with, which makes a lot of sense when you've chosen a dog as a POV character. That you would decide like, well, what is this sort of core theme that I want to explore here, and it's ultimately bound up in the loyalty of dogs, and that's not necessarily mutually exclusive from the idea of facing a supernatural threat. You can of course do something with a dog, you know, bravely facing down a supernatural threat. I guess something that might be interesting to note is that, I mean, if the dog isn't in a position to like meaningfully distinguish between what he perceives as being supernatural events and, you know, the reality of the situation, is it a distinction without a difference ultimately?
Yeah,
like
because
from
the
dog's
dog
perspective, which is
from the dog's perspective, it doesn't matter so much. You know, it kind of the things happening are the things happening, and it's going to contend with it however he can.
Yeah, no,
so just to like, because when I say like if we're gonna do this kind of horror movie, this is how I would prefer it be done. That's basically what I was trying to get at, right? Is that like if we're gonna do one where it's more theme than literal plot, this is probably the way I would suggest to do it. You know, give it a dog protagonist and make it nice and short so that I can kind of digest it a little easier and not feel like I wasted my time with a movie like that. So I would say I was a little disappointed, but not to the point that I completely didn't enjoy my time.
Yeah.
I guess that is interesting because yeah, for me it was I think it would have been maybe like by a third of the way through. That was when I was like, oh, I see. Like in terms of that, it's like I don't know that we're gonna. I think like for the duration of the film, I was certainly like, oh, there's a possibility that there could be like a supernatural thing that is almost exaggerating what this experience is for the dog, but when like I said, I've come to the conclusion that there isn't really a supernatural like element. It's entirely just rooted in the dog's perspective and the fact that the dog can sense and see things and perceives things differently from people that explains the spooky things that he sees. It wasn't like, I mean, it was kind of what I was saying before. I would have preferred it if there were less lines that essentially guided you in that direction.
Yeah.
Like the TV thing of dogs sense things that we don't. It's like, no, I know.
Like the sister in a call specifically says, like, dogs can sense like the sicknesses in people.
Exactly.
And I'm like, oh, okay.
What, you think there's something wrong with Indy because he's sniffing at things and looking in corners? No, Todd, I think there's something wrong with you. Dogs can sense cancer and
it's like bad, which I would say that is the overarching biggest problem with the film is the dialogue. It's very weird.
When we'd watched this together, we'd kind of in our heads sort of wondered what it would look like to have a version of this movie where there was no distinguishable dialogue from any of the human characters, to really, really go into the dog's perspective, where
in Peanuts cartoons kind of thing?
Kind of like that, where there's a way to execute it where it isn't silly, but there's also a way that I think would be really cool to have when a human character talks. We don't really pick out any of the words, except maybe like a sit, stay, come here, that kind of thing. Like we only understand the words that the dog's kind of trained to recognize as either commands or statements that are kind of littered into the dialogue. And there's got to be a similar way to do that with text as well, because if you're the dog and you're looking at the phone and we could clearly see as audience member the text of the phone and what it says, I feel like, I get it. That is what the dog would see, but the dog doesn't understand what those symbols are. So trying to piece together the movie from the perspective of a dog who cannot understand all of the words like the audience can, I think that would be... It's certainly more interesting, and obviously that would depend on its execution. I think you could do it well, but it might be tricky. But I think that'd make for a really cool movie to really lean super hard into the dog's perspective.
I agree, and I think it would
just
manifestly improve this film, because everything I hated about it the most, which would be the dialogue, the acting performances of the human beings, and things of that nature, would just
the dog is the strongest performance in the film.
By a large margin, I would say.
I would say so, yeah.
All the human performances were pretty stale, in my opinion, and I do think that the dialogue was very kind of cringe and on the nose in a lot of situations. So if we heard kind of muffled human sounds and then we heard good boy and things like that, that would be an improvement as well. The other thing I think we could maybe have leaned further into is trying to explore like what a dog's nightmare would be like. I feel like
because in this it was almost like a supernatural kind of thing where the dog was like dreaming about the experience of this other dog and what happened to it, which seemed to actually be what kind of happened with that other dog, sort of. And it kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop, like, because that's what kept me on the on the supernatural side of this movie for a bit, was what was actually in the nightmares that the dog had. was like, oh, is this thing in the house like giving it a premonition, or can it pick up on the emotions and the feelings of, you know, the other dogs that were in the house, and that's what it dreams of, like the dog's a kind of a conduit in a way to those experiences, or, you know, what's going on here with that? And I guess it was just, I don't know. I guess it was he just happened to dream the things that actually or supposedly actually happened to the previous dog.
Very much is relying on essentially that line of the dog can sense things that you can't, to explain how the dog is essentially able to tap into what appear to be like obviously abstract and kind of surreal memories, but very much are meant to be like essentially analogous for what happened in the house before with the grandfather and the previous dog. Because, you know, throughout those, he starts to realize that the dog, you know, appeared to have essentially seen similar things to what he did, but that dog's fate was obviously different from his. And it seems like the conclusion you have to draw is like, well, if it's not supernatural, then what is it? It's like, well, look, man, he's a dog, and, you know, dogs sense things differently from people, which is obviously, it's doing a lot of heavy lifting for a lot of things that could be kind of like, well, hang on, but like, no, but really, like, how did he actually sense that?
Yeah. There were a couple. The other dog's story was another thing that I kind of took a little bit of issue with, because especially by the time that we find the other dog's skeleton. The other dog's name is Bandit, by the way, and Bandit was a very, very good boy.
Isn't that the name of Bluey's like dad?
I
couldn't tell you.
I couldn't tell you.
I've never seen Bluey,
like
but
that.
I'm pretty sure that's the name of. I need to hold on. Just don't you worry. We'll figure this out. The name
We'll get
of
to the bottom of it. Don't worry, chat.
the name of the it is Bandit. That's the dad.
Oh,
It's a good dog.
That's
name,
kind of funny.
Yeah, it's a good dog name.
I like that name. Yeah.
And our Bandit in this movie is very proud of a little red bandana that he has. There's a couple good shots of him with that. I like that. But one of the things that is mentioned by the neighbor, the hunter neighbor, at one point, is that after they found his grandfather's body, because his grandfather presumably died in the house in similar circumstances, I think, is sort of what it's trying to imbue to us there. But he says, after we found your granddad's body, we never could find, you know, his dog. We never could find Bandit. But Bandit was in the basement.
It's kind of wacky that they weren't able to find the dog. Yeah,
like, you didn't go look. Did you even look? Like, the sister found it immediately as soon as she came over, right? Like, she opened.
Is that one of those red herring lines? Ooh, but we never found the dog.
Never found the dog. Ooh, what happened? Yeah, I think it might have been,
right,
and that kind of. I was like, see, you're giving me these hints that it's something supernatural, but then kind of just not really like it doesn't make a lot of sense.
It could, even if we're not going to do something supernatural, like Bandit could have run away and then just got lost in the woods or something.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's right there, like right there.
Right, yeah.
That's kind of the thing, is they've got sort of a problem that's going to be difficult for them to reconcile, because the point has to be that Bandit died out of loyalty. That's like the point.
Yes.
The dog can't have run off. He can't have just run off into the forest and got lost, because it's antithetical to what's being driven home here, which is that essentially Indy is in a position to suffer the same fate stemming from what we would describe as essentially being the best aspect of dogs from a human perspective, which is their loyalty.
Yeah.
So they have that problem of like, well, they should have found him though, because he's right there.
Does it really change anything if Bandit was found starved, like dead, right next to him?
It would just be the skeleton that moves, right?
I don't think. Well, it's kind of why you have it's kind of the reason why it's valid to point out that like the film probably would have been helped if there was no human dialogue, or if the human dialogue was incomprehensible, because then like it doesn't, you know, you don't even, I don't know, like problems I think that you wouldn't necessarily need to deal with as much.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I don't know that we necessarily need the skeleton anyway, right? For the point to like.
I do think the movies
in the film.
You cut out again. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just there were like the fact that we already have a whole bunch of what could be described as like hallucinations or visions and everything. You could convey the fate of the dog as being essentially the same as what happened without the literal skeleton, I would say.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I think the movie does really well, and my big criticism in this regard would just be that they didn't explore the dog's perspective more thoroughly, like Rag said. But they do some things that I think are really nice. Like it's a basic thing in the beginning, but like he's staring off into the corner and seeing things that humans don't see. Everyone who's had a dog has had that sort of experience before. Like, what are you looking at?
Yeah.
Like that's a nice little touch. I want more of those touches. I don't feel like we got a ton of them. I feel like, there's little things you could do. Like if more of his dreams involved him running or something like that, because classic like dog having a nightmare is like, it's twitching
Very
like it's running.
mundane experiences for a dog. You would think
Yeah.
that they dream of very normal sorts of things, I would imagine, though I'm
Yeah,
not
you'd think
sure,
so.
but that would be something you could do, as I guess part of the process of making the film.
Yeah. Um, all of my biggest criticism, because I think I agree, because that's sort of I like the idea that we're sort of doing a sort of doggy version of The Shining, where the owner, the dad, basically is like, there's two sides of him that are coming out because he's like not handling the grief he's dealing with well, and he's sort of like there's a darker side of him that is manifesting externally in a sort of vaguely supernatural way. I think I like that idea a lot, and I definitely like the general theme of the story and the elevator pitch. But I have a lot of questions about what literally happens. I think I'll just jump ahead to one of my biggest ones. Is okay. So we're doing a spooky sequence before we go outside. Um, let me just okay, so he's hiding from the dad, Todd, master, whatever, and then he gets like pet by a creepy, slimy hand. They're hiding together, like
Yeah,
because some
he's
sort of
off the
threat.
bed. He's off the
Yeah,
bed.
on
He's
the
on the
floor.
ground, and he's like, this
Yes,
is
that's what it
one
is.
of the things that I found a little odd is that he manages to reach all the way across to the other side of the bed
Yeah,
and
we're
grab
playing a little
Indy.
bit
And
fast
yeah,
and loose
we're
with that,
playing a little
but
bit
he
with space to give us a nice jump scare. But he grabs Indy and pulls him across, and he's holding on to him as he's lying on the ground, and he's
then he
stroking his
goes
fur.
into the other room. He says, "Stay there." And then there is a spooky demon like mud monster thing on top of the dresser, and it's dripping blood in front of Todd. And Todd sort of like looks up at this, like, what spooky thing? And then before Indy can go, presumably try to save him, supernaturally, a door gets slammed before he can enter the room. So they get separated. They get physically separated. He's trapped in the bedroom. And what Indy will do is jump out the window into the bush to cushion his fall, aim for the bushes, as they say. And then he runs away to go get help. And I'm like, I'm locked in for this part. I'm like, oh, okay. So like whatever the supernatural force is that's been creeping closer, it's got his master. And so he's gonna do the heroic dog thing and go run as far as he needs to run to go find help, right? So he's running through the woods. He he's barking. He doesn't actually bark a whole lot in the movie, but he's barking a lot.
No,
Very
not
little.
really.
I would have liked to seen more aggression
Yeah,
from
Yeah.
the
I
dog at
agree with that
certain
actually. Yeah.
parts.
Yeah,
Yeah, agreed.
especially for spooky moments, you would think, because I think this right before the scene I'm just describing, something spooky is coming up the stairs and he doesn't bark at it. He just goes and runs under the bed. It just, it feels weird to say this, but like, I don't know if I believed his character would do that. Um,
No, well, I think that one of the things about like they do kind of telegraph a little bit. So he falls asleep to a documentary about dogs at one point, and it's the one about like, oh well, dogs have can see things and threats that humans can't, and so they are trained to detect and alert their owners to those threats, unseen threats. But he doesn't do a lot of alerting. Is one thing that I wish that he would have done a little bit more of. Is maybe like if we see that he's kind of getting on the nerves of his sick and grieving owner who by barking at stuff frequently. That
yeah,
might
that
have
would
been
help, I think. That
something
would
that
help,
goes a little
especially
bit further.
that would help exacerbate Todd's sort of like annoyance with and hostility to Indy. I think if he was barking more at these threats. You don't want him barking the entire time, maybe, because that might get annoying. But I think there are
Yeah.
certainly situations where his barking would be more appropriate. But he's running through the woods, presumably to go get help. He's being a good boy. He's running. He's super fast. He's barking, trying to get someone's attention. He gets caught in the fox trap that the neighbor, who is a hunter, has put out. And then a spooky force, oddly Hassan Piker shaped, is approaching him. And oh no, it's going to get him. And then it cuts to black. And we cut back. He's
in a doghouse now. He's chained to a doghouse. Yeah.
So did Todd just go chase him down and get him?
Was that a dream? Who set the trap?
Well, I guess that makes you wonder like what the interpretation could be, because I guess one you could go with is like, well, whatever it is that he's seeing might not be that like Todd has caught up to him this quickly, because that would seem a little bit far-fetched, but that he got caught, saw something that was spooky at some point, maybe like fell asleep because a much more time passed than that, and then Todd did find him, and then he woke up and he was attached to it. And it's like, well, is that a particularly satisfying answer? It's like, I'm not sure. I don't know, because like because it's kind of obviously the point that you're getting at, which is that there's like more than one instance of this in the film where the literal interpretation of what happened is kind of like difficult to figure out, and but it's from the dog's perspective, so it's kind of hard to, it's hard to make sense of. It's like, that's doing a lot of heavy lifting, and I would say that to varying degrees, that is easier and harder to get behind, on the one hand, it's easy for me to go like, yeah, sure, maybe the dog is able to essentially sense kind of like quite vividly the fate of the grandfather and the other dog. Maybe that is something that the dog can do, and I can believe that. But kind of like your example there, it's like, well, that is a little bit harder, because it's like, I mean, things are literally happening, and we know that. There are things that are definitely happening that are meant to be seen as absolutely real. But then there are certain ones that are harder to grasp. And on the one hand, it can be like, well, that helps accentuate the experience, right? It really roots you in the dog's perspective. It's like, sure, that's true, but also it does make it a bit harder to say like, yeah, but what happened?
Yeah, a little bit of committing to it, I think, would serve the movie well in some places, because the dog wouldn't be confused about some things. There would be actually the things that occur to the dog that it would be aware of.
Yeah, and I think what threw me here is that this sort of implies if Todd is the one who actually finds him in the woods and is approaching him and brings him back, and now he's being a bit more cruel than he was before, the implication sort of seems to me, but I'm still thinking of this as supernatural the first time I'm watching it. I'm like, oh, okay, Todd finally saw the demon in the previous scene, and he went up to it, and he got attacked by it. And now Indy has to go run to get help, but he gets caught. And then what looks exactly like the spooky demon has looked the entire time finds him in the woods, grabs him, brings him back to the doghouse, and now he's chained up, and Todd is being a bit more Jack Nicholson in The Shining now. He's like, I told you to stay. And it's like, oh, this isn't like you. You're mean now. And so I'm like, oh, is he okay? He's possessed.
I thought this was about being possessed. Yeah, I thought for a lot of it is like, oh, is the sickness literally caused by him being possessed, and this thing is killing him as it possesses him?
Yeah, and it can work metaphorically too, if like he's sort of allowing his sort of anger and resentment at the fact that he's dealing with this sickness, like allow him to, all those angry feelings to fester, and that's what, it can work
and it changes
psychologically.
his behavior towards his dog, right? Yeah.
Yes, and that all works and makes sense. So now he's chained up outside the doghouse, right? And Todd goes back inside, not before like starting the generator to, I guess, keep the house running, which is blowing smoke directly at Indy's doghouse. That's not very nice. And I'm like, okay, but what is Todd doing now? So Todd is back in the house. And then Indy is attacked by the spooky demon from the doghouse, essentially, while Todd is still inside. So I'm like, okay, it's not that this like dark cloud, this a human-shaped abyss has crept closer and closer and now has possessed Todd. There's still distinct things. Todd is upstairs, and now there's a demon outside who's pulling on his chain, and I don't really know what's happening anymore. I think this is kind of where what I liked about the movie and what I thought it was going to do didn't seem plausible as an interpretation anymore. Though I do like, as I mentioned earlier, when the demon is pulling on his chain, trying to pull it, like creepy hands pulling his chain, trying to get him into the doghouse. It's raining and lightning and all that stuff. It's a very spooky sequence. And then Indy decides, fuck it, I'm going to run straight at this thing and tackle it and send the whole doghouse toppling over. And that allows him to break free. I like that, but I don't understand what's literally happening anymore.
Well, unless it is immediately after that too, because he breaks the chain off, and then the cellar door just sort of opens on its own to let Indy back into the house, which is another instance where I'm like, so was that just open the whole time, or like we sort of watch it open, if I'm remembering right? So like, what happened there too? So like this sequence is really where
it like closes on its own. One of the doors does, as if it doesn't want him to get in, but he goes in anyway.
Yeah.
Really.
The sequence is really where those problems kind of reared their head for me too.
I think, because basically, I think, Fringy, you were about to say what I assume the interpretation must be is that this is just another dream that the dog doesn't know how to make sense of, right?
Yeah, I would say that I think that the film probably would say that is essentially the explanation every time for something that appeared to be interpretable literally, which to some extent it could be like, well, is that a satisfying answer? It's like, well, that's kind of the problem, is it's like, it's kind of complicated, because in certain instances that's the acceptable answer, but then there are other times where it's like, well, feels like at this point the only conclusion would have to be that there is a supernatural element that is also involved, but like I just distinctly get the impression that you're not meant to conclude that by the end of the story. And to an extent, I kind of have a preference for that being the case, that it isn't supernatural, that it was entirely just like, well, this is what happens when it's rooted in the dog's perspective. But it's like it's almost as if you need the film to sort of make up its mind and pick a lane to figure out, and then to commit to how that literally works in the world.
It was toying too much with the supernatural stuff for too long, where it became almost like confusing as to what it wanted me to think.
What's that? An interesting thing is that because I was thinking about, I've still been thinking a bit about no dialogue, because Flow is my favorite movie of 2024. I really like that film, and that feels like it would almost seem like, well, what is the comparison? Is it literally just that the protagonists are animals? Like, that's there. But it feels like you've got two movies that have a concept that they're really honed in on, and the difference would be that Flow is like quite an ambitious idea executed very well. This one is a slightly less ambitious but still cool idea that's got a more wonkier, sort of rough execution, a more inconsistent execution. I almost wonder how much of that stems from the fact that the film isn't as willing to commit to certain things that are unusual compared to other films, like the fact that Flow thoroughly, completely commits to no dialogue, compared to this film where it's like, well, there isn't much dialogue compared to the average film, but there's still plenty.
Yeah.
As well as explanations being provided that could have been left out, and then maybe also an element of how much stuff in here is stuff that you put in here because it's the thing that's in a lot of other horror movies that people seem to like, even though they suck, like The Conjuring.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
Oh, no.
My big sort of visceral problem with the movie is that too many of the spooky things are rather lame, generic Conjuring style spooks, and very few, if any of them, are actually happening. That wears on me a bit. Even if I like thematically what's happening, I think good movies, in my mind, can do both, where like what's literally happening and what's thematically happening are both working, and they both complement each other. The Shining is always my go-to example of that, because psychologically and thematically it's very rich, but also like there are literal supernatural things happening. It's not a metaphor. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess the thing is I could be wrong. Maybe the conclusion is meant to be that there is some degree to which it's supernatural, but that is only accentuating and contributing to essentially still that core interpretation. But at the same time, it's like I said, I think that that's not even the conclusion that the filmmaker would want you to draw. So,
if I was being, I think that if you wanted to, and you're being super subjective, you could list out a really good argument that there was supernatural stuff happening based off of what we see. And if it is not intended, I think that regardless of what the intentions are, there's still some pretty strong arguments to be made in the movie. Like the doors closing, in themselves or opening by themselves.
That scene where he bashes his head against the door for some reason.
The big spooky hallway in the basement feels like the big one. It's
there's a big spooky Lovecraftian tunnel to some
the tunnel to
black void
hell or something, like the underworld.
The other thing that's weird about that, just even thematically, it's like, did Todd go to hell? Is that what happened?
Well, the thing is, it looks really bad from the dog's perspective, but maybe he's being dragged into heaven, But
everything has been literal from the dog's perspective. Well, that doesn't match the what the other stuff that the dog sees that isn't like literal, Yeah. Like that's just a hole in the basement.
Yeah, like a door-shaped hole, a very large door-shaped hole.
Unless that's not there. Which I get because it feels like it's something that's worth pointing out in terms of essentially explaining this, but also a compliment to the film, which is that I think it does a really good job from the actual filmmaking itself to ground you in the dog's perspective. There's a lot of the shots are from sort of the ground level. A lot of the framing is like from the dog's POV in a way that would be sort of unusual compared to the way that you would be shooting if there were just people standing around or moving around and talking. I think all of that obviously contributes to sort of grounding you in the dog's POV, and it's probably meant to be the argument in favor of interpreting a lot of things from the dog's POV, which is not going to be the same as a human being, which obviously there's degrees to which you can get behind that and degrees to which it's like, well, wait, hang on. But I mean, obviously, I think that's worth complimenting in and of itself. I think there's like a lot of good filmmaking on display, even if there are some rough edges to that as well, like with certain bad visual effects shots. Really.
It's a low budget movie, and I think a lot of the filmmaking choices are quite strong, and I think it looks good for as low budget as it is. I don't really mind
I think so.
Bad broken glass CGI. That's fine.
But those are just like things you couldn't have. They just should have done something alternative to those.
I agree.
Like him jumping into the bushes. There's no reason why you couldn't simply construct the house in such a way that he can jump onto the porch roof and then down onto something else and then down to the ground. You could have had it be any kind of way. You just chose that, and so that's one of those things. Is like it's like it's annoying to see those little things. Because like you could have just done something different. But oh well, it's not a huge deal. But
which I would say it's a lot of those things that kind of get me in favor of the film, because it's really a matter of, man, there were like these things that if you were just tweaked it like even just a little bit and it wouldn't have taken much, or it's strictly a creative decision and it could like make the film like dramatically improve. If it was like this film is actually tweaks away from going from where it is to actually being like truly a great film, which is a little unfortunate, but at the same time is like a directorial debut. I'm fairly impressed by it. Yeah, this is his first movie, so
I don't think that.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't think that there's, but I do think you're right. I think this film could probably be tweaked into being a great film, which is good to hear, because there is no singular huge thing that sticks out to me as just this was a horrible, terrible idea, and you are a complete moron for making it. That would worry me about like future films that they make. So that's optimistic, I feel, and that leaves me, interested in what they do next.
Yeah, because I would seize opportunities to talk about Flow again, because have any of you guys seen Flow, by the way?
I haven't yet, but I need to.
You gotta see it. You have to. It's really good. It's Sorry,
Tron has consumed my life this last.
No, of course, no. It's because again, it's just. I think the reason why I find the comparison apt is it is a low budget film with a sort of a cool premise that's related to an animal protagonist, and I would say like it's that film is more locked in terms of like achieving what it wants to achieve compared to this one. But at the same time, this one is just small tweaks away from starting to approach that level of locking in. I wouldn't say that. Then again, I would say that Flow is like very impressive. So I don't know that this film. It'd be hard to get this particular film as close to it, particularly because Flow is like quite thematically ambitious. I would say, in a way that I very much appreciate. It's a little bit more complicated. And executes on that quite well, which works in its favor compared to this one, where it's more like you can tweak it to get to be like a really good version of the same relatively straightforward film.
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am impressed by the filmmaking on display here for how low budget it is and for it being his first feature. There's one shot in particular that jumps out to me. It's when he's so he's come back from. Yeah, we need to talk about the scene at the doctor's office at some point because it annoys me. But he's
the doctor's office, right?
Yeah, he comes back from the doctor's office, a corner of the room, and he's put up a bunch of house plants and crystals and sage because he's gone homeopathic in terms of trying to treat himself.
What he can, yeah.
And so, but there's a shot where you can see the human who we don't see the face of very often. The movie, quite a bit like, Lady and the Tramp, sort of sticks at dog level, and we don't really see the human's faces very often. We get it at the very, very end for a moment that it has some impact, and I like. But we see his reflection in the TV screen, and we see the dog on the other side. And it's just like you get to see both in the same shot. It's a really nice little stuff like that. It's simple. It's not like, wow, that's the craziest shot I've ever seen, but it's very effective. And it
strikes me as he has seen films before and he's picked up good lessons from them.
Yes.
Whereas a lot of people see films before and they pick up really bad lessons from them.
Yeah.
But I think he's been positively inspired by a lot of the things he's seen, and we could see that here in the filmmaking. Yeah, it wasn't unpleasant to watch. It was shot well.
Yeah, it had a
I think
charm
that's
to
probably like for me that's its biggest strength. Yeah, apart from just the fact that it's a very unique perspective to take, I think the way he executes that, the visual style is just very encouraging for what he's going to do next, and the fact that like it really is like little tweaks that are gonna improve, like little tweaks in his execution for the writing that are gonna improve it is like that's also a really good sign too for a first feature, right? Like not too many people come out and just knock it out of the park on the first,
One thing before we jump back into the movie, has anyone here seen Bad Moon?
No.
Bad Moon is a 90s movie. It has bad reviews, but it's like old bad movie, the kind of bad we used to have.
Like MST3K kind of movie.
I thoroughly enjoyed it for what it was. Bad Moon is a movie about... So the dog is not the protagonist, but he is the hero of the movie. They have a German Shepherd who is their pet, and there's a family member who turns into a werewolf. And the dog protects them from the werewolf. And that's kind of more what I was hoping this movie would be, just in terms of the threat that the protagonist dog faces, right? Something a bit more tangible. Bad Moon's a very enjoyable movie. I wouldn't call it good, but I think it's a fun watch. And there's some decent, werewolf practical effects in that movie. So I thought it was enjoyable. All right, back to Good Boy. So let's talk about that doctor's office scene, because this scene struck me as really cringe and unnecessary. He at one point brings the dog to the office, which I'm not sure why he does.
I can tell you why he does, because Indy was caught by the goop monster at some point, and the man goes to the basement looking for him and finds him hiding behind the basement door. On his way back up the stairs, which is another kind of weird editing choice, I think. And he's covered in mud, so he takes Indy to go have a bath. And while he's bathing him, he coughs up a concerning amount of blood. And so
directly
onto Indy's face. And so he goes to get an MRI and get some scanning done and everything, and then he's in the doctor's office hearing the bad news.
Yeah, I don't know why the dog is there though. That doesn't really changed that for me. But
if anything, I think it's probably a bad idea to ever remove Indy from the house. Like that should be the permanent location that the dog stays in for the entire story. I think, like taking the dog out of the house, bad idea.
I totally agree. And one of the more effective like scenes for getting me to feel sympathy for this poor dog is when he's left alone for the first time, when Todd goes to get, and so we're like, because at this point we've been told by unnecessary dialogue that Indy is rather clingy and follows him everywhere, but we've been given nothing to indicate that like that's an obsessive thing
bad,
thing. Yeah, he's just kind of loyal and sticks by his side, which isn't really a problem at all. We don't really see any behavior, at least in that section of the movie, that's like,
I think we got a little bit of dialogue from the sister on the phone about how it's concerning that Indy never leaves him or something.
Oh, that's
like
what I meant.
Yeah.
Like, other than that unnecessary dialogue, it like setting that up, we don't really see any sort of clingy behavior. But then when he is left alone in this house for the first time, it's like, oh, he does have separation anxiety. And someone mentioned it in the chat that this breed in particular is rather prone to that, which is an interesting detail.
Tolling terrier. A retriever.
You cut out a little bit. Can you say that one more time?
Oh, the Nova Scotia duck tolling retriever. That is this dog breed, which I'd never heard of.
Quite the duck tolls.
It's a
it is apparently the sort of, well, I was going to say the national dog. It's the state dog of Nova Scotia, if you can believe that.
No way.
I can believe that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I never heard of this breed before, but yes, they are.
It's a cute
I guess
dog.
one of those. Yeah, very handsome dog.
But yeah, apparently this dog is rather prone to separation anxiety. So like when he leaves it alone and it starts whining for the first time, and then it jumps into that chair, and we do that nice little bit of filmmaking where we do a match cut, and he's still sitting in the same spot the whole time. That's a really effective moment.
Yeah, good stuff.
It really pulls on the heartstrings. It really establishes his loyalty, even to like a sort of problematic degree for his own well-being. So I like that. And then when he goes to the doctor's office later, it does feel like we've broken out of what was working by like bringing the dog along just so he can see the MRI. You know what I mean? And then when we get the dialogue with the guy and the doctor, he's talking to a doctor.
Yeah, the doctor. He's asking for that experimental clinical trial treatment for whatever it is that he's got, and the doctor says something like, "Sorry, nothing we can do. Maybe if you'd come in sooner." And that part, I kind of was like, "But he's been in at least twice we've seen." He was in at the beginning of the movie. That's how we started this whole thing off. And then in that scene where he leaves Indy alone, he's out to get blood work. So he's been going to a doctor. I'm not really. I don't like that bit of dialogue. I think that's. I
don't think it makes any sense. It feels shoehorned in there. It feels like not a huge one. It's not too cringe, but it feels like we're making a comment on the healthcare system. It's like, I don't know that this is really necessary.
I don't know if it's like I don't know if I'm like exactly willing to go that far, but it does feel to me
Maybe
like
not.
it's kind of telegraphing the terminalness of the disease, because it's like
as if that wasn't kind of obvious already.
Yeah.
It was so obvious from the fact that he's like isolating himself in the woods, and he's still going for blood work and stuff, but his mental health is taking a toll, and he's sort of isolating himself from his family and the rest of the world. Like, that's all pretty obvious, I think. And so then he gets to be mad, like, "Oh, come on, I'm willing to be your guinea pig," and she's like, "No, we have strict requirements for these clinical trials. Maybe if you came in sooner." Like, I guess maybe when he started coughing up blood, he was like, now, not before, but now I'm willing to risk anything to do the clinical trial. Oh, but it's too late. Like, I don't know. It doesn't help that the performances are really stilted and stale, and the dialogue is kind of very deliberate and
it's
on
just
the nose.
Strange. It's very strange delivery of the human stuff. It's kind of weird. So it's almost like the VIPs in Squid Game a little bit. It's like,
a little bit.
It's just a bit
Maybe not
weird.
that bad. Maybe not.
Not that bad, but like kind of the same vibe of something is off. Like in a way that almost feels like, do you know how people talk?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like
Oh,
an
for
odd
sure.
thing to mention when I thought like because the sister is also sort of calling him and being like maybe you shouldn't go this far from a hospital, right? Like it just seems like the treatments I don't know. It's a odd line of dialogue to include. Feels like maybe something that like he heard in a medical drama at one point and just put in there. Like, yeah, this will really drive home that it's terminal, that we're getting close to the end. So like, yeah.
Of the things that he does well as a director in this movie, like, the visuals and in general, the pacing, I think is pretty good. Uh,
I think so. It does
um,
not overstay its welcome, this film. It
no, it does
benefits
not.
greatly from its runtime.
Yeah.
The thing I think he's probably weakest at, I'm not including the writing here, just like talking about directing, is that I don't feel like he got good performances out of these actors. One thing that kept coming up for me is that like they're not leaving enough moments of like processing time in these conversations. That doesn't make me feel like they're thinking and reacting to each other. Like every line is immediately followed up by the next line. You don't really get the sense that the person heard what the other person said, is processing it, and has to like think about how to respond. It felt noticeable to me that they were just sort of saying their lines, and I feel like the doctor's office is probably one of the most egregious examples of that. But it happens in a lot of the phone conversations thing. It's just a timing thing.
I
It's
wonder how
just
much
like,
of it is because it seems like basically every single line of dialogue is ADR, except for maybe the
yes,
last scene with Todd. But there's so much of it, it's like, man, it feels like it was recorded in a booth. I
yeah,
wonder if that hurt the pacing.
it definitely does sound like ADR, that the audio editor paced himself in the edit. And then the other thing is there are a couple of moments where you can see it's a little out of focus because it's not the focus of the shot, but you can see that their lips aren't moving. Like,
Yeah.
oh, come on. You could have
I'm
just
not really
had
sure why they did it that way. Like, I mean, for some of them, obviously, on the phone call, you have to do that. But, like, with Todd,
Sure.
I don't really understand that one at all.
I think he got
I'm not
paid
sure
by
why.
the word.
I wonder how much of it was because it might have been difficult to get the dog to do the things that it needed to do if he was talking. I wonder if that's the reason why. Like, if he was, if the dog was like, "Wait, hang on, what are you talking about? I want to pay attention to you."
I can absolutely understand that most of this movie would be ADR, especially because, it would be very helpful to have the dog trainer, presumably the owner, and I think it's the director's dog, right?
Yeah,
So
it
the
is.
director off camera,
Yeah.
like, okay, Indy, come over here, now sit. And then you just cut all that out later, right? I'm like 99% sure that's how they did most of Indy's
Probably,
scenes.
especially if it's your first film and you're trying to direct a dog, which has probably got its own challenges to
Oh,
do. And
certainly.
I was never distracted by in bad films. You notice whenever there's a dog in it or an animal, typically it's going to be a dog who's clearly looking at the person who's directing them off
Yes.
camera. But here they did a really good job where that was never an issue. I was never distracted by the dog not being, in character, so to speak.
Yeah. I think my only real criticism there at all is that I would like in a few scenes for him to like bark more essentially, or that like that's how I might expect him to react in this scenario, but he doesn't.
Mhm.
But in general, the dog acting is very good. The dog directing is very good.
Someone in the chat pointed out that this breed is not known for barking particularly. So like that.
Okay, fair
yeah.
enough, I guess. Yeah.
I still I understand that, but I still would like more from that aspect. Like,
Yeah, agreed.
He's an actor. Come on.
That's right.
So yeah,
I think that we could have made more use of the maybe we could have done something where, because the grandpa died there before, we could have learned a bit more from him that was less dog having a vision or a dream about it happening, and done more about the stuff that the grandfather left behind, messages, notes, because we got some TV stuff, but it
Mhm.
was really ambiguous. But I think it could have been really neat to have a bit more from him and what he left behind and what you could maybe piece together from his stuff. But
like environmentally, like
kind of, yeah.
objects and yeah.
Especially
think
if it had been a more supernatural focused kind of thing, the father leaving a warning or saying something about the house or when things began, or anything like that. It could have been neat. It's not a problem with the film at all. It's just it could have been neat to see.
Yeah. One of the things I really liked before it sort of set in that most of what's spooky here isn't really happening, or it's happening from the dog's unreliable perspective. First of all, I don't know if I believe that the dog's perspective is this unreliable. I've never been inside a dog's head, but that is something I struggle with a little in this movie. But one of the things I did really like, and sort of lent itself to the interpretation that something supernatural is like bending reality in a way, and maybe even bending time, like things are looping, kind of like The Shining, where you know things are happening in different time periods almost simultaneously, or they're happening the same way. There's a great shot when we're watching an old home movie of the dad. He's sitting in the living room, or the grandpa, whoever it was, and Indy hears something, in the other room to the right of the TV, and he goes wandering in that direction. And at the same time, the granddad has a sort of feeling, and then he turns that same camera direction to like look in the same direction. Like they both heard it at the same time, out
Yeah.
of time. That's really cool and surreal. I wish there was more of that.
I
Because
agreed. That'd be good if there was more stuff like that, because those are those sort of glimpses of like, man, that's pretty cool. And then it's like the more that we can get of those ones, and the less of just like, oh, here comes the thing, run that, yeah, it's like, yeah. The more that you could sort of mix it up like that is better for pacing as well.
So let's talk about the spooks and scares in isolation and how we feel about them. We talked about the interpretation and justification of them. I'm curious what you guys thought the best and worst spooky scenes are in the film. I will lead off with my least favorite, and it's the one where Todd is lying at the bottom of the stairs and Indy is looking at him, and then it goes and runs up at
Yeah,
him.
that was probably my least favorite.
Yeah, I didn't like that. That
my
was
favorite.
like, how does the dog supposed to? What actually happened here?
He got startled, I guess.
It would
I
be,
got
for me, it would
startled.
be a tie between that one and the one where Todd reaches across the entire bed from the bottom to grab the back of Indy's collar and drag him to the other side, because I just don't believe his arms are that long, man. Like,
I think that's fair enough. Yeah. The thing is like right at the start, I really enjoyed just looking into the corner and kind of like, is that a shadow that I'm seeing there, or is that like something else? Is that actually like the form of like some entity?
Yeah.
I thought those were quite cool right at the start. Very much leaning into that kind of what you pointed out. It's like, yeah, what are you looking at? What is it that you see there? And it's like, yeah, but I think I can kind of see it too, but I'm not sure. Like those, I thought were cool. The one with the old dog in the basement, and then just the close up shot on his eye, and then you see the big spooky hand reaching out. I thought was a cool one.
I like that one too, where it goes up to him. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of which other ones I would single out as being like really cool compared to just like, yeah, it's all right.
There were a few shots of a figure in the woods that were pretty good. Like at nighttime, you could kind of see it. Obviously, the eyes in the darkness, the reflecting eyes, that we see it first, I think, in the log, in the hollow log, and then we see it at night, and then later on we see a fox looking at the Indy sees a fox and it has the glowing eyes as well, which is like, oh, was that what he was seeing the whole time?
Those are kind of eerie in a nice way, especially just kind of in isolation, like, oh, creepy eyes peering from the dark.
Creepy eyes in the woods is classic. Can't go wrong with creepy eyes in the woods.
Do we all agree that the jump scare when he runs up the stairs, is that the worst one?
Worst one. That's the worst one for sure.
Yeah.
That one felt much more like a lame horror movie thing. It's just like, all you did was startle. That's all you did. You startled. You didn't scare.
One wonders if the people that make these kind of movies, let's just broadly call them low budget indie movies that are because there are different kinds of horror movies, right? There's the larger budget ones, like the Conjuring movies, that are maybe like $40 million. They have famous faces in them. There are the sort of like very artsy, barely even considered horror movies that A24 likes to make these days, where it's like, is this even really a horror movie? I'm not even sure what you're trying to do anymore.
It's a allegory for depression. Ooh,
and then And then I would say that there are low budget horror movies that are like capital H horror movies, like that you couldn't mistake what genre they are, and they're trying to get teenage butts in seats and all that sort of stuff. One wonders if the creators of those movies know that the audience likes jump scares, because they do. They reliably do.
Audiences like jump scares, clearly, given the success
I
of the
hate
movies
them.
that have
I
them.
despise
I hate them
them.
too. Because they're
actually
startling
hate them.
you. Like, it just relies on the fact that you as a human being will reflexively react to a sudden loud noise or sudden movement. That's just like it's lame. It's not actually scaring you in
It's just surprising my
it's
instincts as a biological creature.
I think the fact that people think that Soma isn't scary should be the clearest indication that like actual effective horror like often doesn't work. Soma is like conceptually scary. It's like existentially scary, not in the sense that there's any like thing that jumps out and you go like, boom, even though it's got, you know, spooky monsters and stuff, but like what's scary about it is the concepts that it's dealing with. But like for a lot of people, it does seem like it's as simple as like, ooh, spooky ghost. It goes, blah, blah, blah. It's like, wow, that was scary. Like that scared the shit out of me. It's like, fucking hell, man, really? Like, okay.
Yeah, and I often try to imagine like what's the most charitable interpretation that doesn't make me hate the kind of people that love jump scares. It's like, okay, you're in high school and you want to go with a bunch of your friends and like just wait for something spooky to happen, and then you get a big rise out of everyone, and that's kind of fun and funny, like a roller coaster ride. I suppose I can understand it. Obviously, I don't like it. I'm trying to think like of jump scares that I actually really like, and for the most part, I just don't. But
The
I get
Descent is typically the go-to for like
the Descent's
really well
that's probably the best if you want to call it a jump scare. But I wouldn't even call it a jump scare because again, it feels like it's not giving it enough credit. Because jump scares to me are like exclusively negative in terms of the connotation. I guess in terms of the tie to this film, I would say that like the concept that it's dealing with is nice and spooky in and of itself, which is like, well, how does it feel for a dog that essentially is able to detect that its owner is dying and sort of turning into somebody that he can't recognize, but he can't quite intellectualize that. It's like that's like cool as a thing to delve into. Like that's nice and spooky in and of itself, compared to any specific like scary imagery. And it feels like it is that connection with the protagonist that is drawn there, and the way that you can, even though you're not a dog, obviously we're not dogs, but well, except for Rags, you can somewhat connect to that in terms of like, well, there are going to be circumstances in life where there are things that are happening that you can essentially make sense. You can sense, but you can't make sense of, and how that makes you feel. Like whether that makes you feel alienated from you know, life in some respect. It's like, yeah, that's nice and effective. That works in and of itself compared to spooky thing going up the stairs. Like that's just like, you know, you startled me. You did. I was kind of expecting it, but not really. And he moved really fast. He played a loud noise. So, you know, though I do appreciate that the film doesn't use all of the kind of like cues and everything. It's a lot more restrained, I would say, compared to most shit horror.
Certainly.
Well, it isn't a bad horror movie, but compared to most horror movies.
Yeah, even movies that don't necessarily have jump scares, they'll do that thing where if someone moves across the doorway in the background, they'll play a really loud stinger. Instead of just, every time I'm like, creepier without it. It would be so
it
much
is. It definitely is.
It's
reminded of because it's one of the earlier scares where they're in the car, like as they're getting to the cabin, and Indy looks out the back window, and I don't know if he looks out the back window, but there's a spooky man like standing outside of it.
Yes,
and just having that played straight with no musical cue to just let it sort of sink in is like,
yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Fringy to come back.
Oh, I was saying that's what I like to see is that kind of thing. Damn it, that's annoying. Hold on.
It just seems to be a regular thing that only happens to you, which is pretty spooky. How does that make you feel? Does it make you feel alienated?
I'm gonna hold on.
And we're back. Hopefully that helps. What the question I was going to get to was, I wonder if the creator of this movie legitimately thinks jump scares are good, or whether that's in there because he knows that audiences want it, and he wants this to appeal broadly to a horror crowd. I get the feeling because it's literally the only one, and he doesn't rely on so many of these other common gimmicks, that it's like, we'll put one in there just to like.
I feel the same way.
Yeah,
because I'm willing to give this filmmaker a bit of credit for the fact that this is quite a well executed debut film.
Yeah, I think so. It might be that, well, this is what people want. We'll get it in there so some people, who are less cerebral, maybe they can get something out of it. So it still keeps people on their toes. Or maybe yeah, I mean, I feel like if it was something he was really going for, he would have leaned into them further.
Did you cut out, or was that the end of the sentence?
It might have
I think
been.
that was the end of his sentence.
Oh, okay.
I think it was the end of his sentence. I just my inflection was just.
We're all sitting here waiting, like.
Pins and needles. Yeah, I'm inclined to think that this was done out of either a sense of trying to just give what he thinks mainstream audiences want, or he just thought variety is good. I'll give them variety. I think there's a danger in that. Obviously, this movie, I don't think the spooks are too repetitive. Some people might say that, but I do think it keeps it fresh enough. I think the only thing that might distract you is wondering, okay, but how many of these things are really happening? What exactly is happening here? But I do think there's a danger in varying things just for varying's sake. Like, I remember, I didn't watch the movie, but I watched Mahler's video on it when he's talking about Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, where like he like they summon that like giant cat head thing. It's like, that's just a really dumb idea. Why would you do that? And it feels like it's motivated by like, oh well, we just want something different to happen now. We already did using a portal.
Cool.
We can't have the same effective spell over and over.
Yeah, exactly.
Boring.
Exactly. It's a balance, right? Trying to make sure that all the spooks feel cohesive, like they're all motivated by the same general force or premise, while also varying it enough. Usually, I think the best way to do variety in spooks like this, especially haunted house movies, is to sort of ramp them up. I don't know how you guys felt about it, whether you felt like things ramped up well in this movie or not.
I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah,
I think it was a pretty good job. Nothing stellar, but I was decently like, okay, I could kind of sense that, especially for the runtime, things are starting to happen. Stuff's getting serious.
But you can tell when the turning point comes, like for the end, where you're like, okay, yeah, it's picking up the pace. We're getting close now. We're about to hit the climax. Yeah. He's about to get dragged to hell through the basement.
Yeah.
I think it does a pretty good job with that. I think really the only thing that, like, but for me, what it was like, by the time I realized that these weren't supernatural things, I was kind of like, more is happening, but is it real? And I was still kind of questioning that while I was watching it until right at the end. So that had a little bit of a dampening effect for me.
Yeah, it dampens how scared I can be by it when it's all a dream, or when it's all unreliable and metaphorical, and like from an unreliable or incomprehensible psychological perspective. Dampens how scared I can be by it at a certain point. If this was, a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, that would get really obnoxious.
I would have been very frustrated if it was any longer.
Yeah. Well, I felt that exact frustration watching any of the Conjuring movies, like that sort of thing. It's just like, and now a different spooky thing.
Yeah, it's 3 hours of just walking around a room and looking around and nothing happens and there's no characters and the dialogue sucks and I hate it all. It's one of the worst things
2 hours to go.
To horror.
Yeah. I think someone, especially like, the type of teenager that wants to go see the roller coaster ride where they get startled, would think this movie is boring at first. But I think it's actually, I like movies that start this slow and atmospheric. It's like, there's something creeping closer. So far it's just a spooky humanoid shaped abyss shadow monster, but it's getting closer. We don't know what it is or what's going to happen yet, and like we don't. It starts very slow in a good way, I would say.
I think so.
Agreed.
Let's see. What else is there to talk about? It's a short movie where really, and I don't. This isn't an insult. Not a lot happens. Like,
Yeah.
No, it's I get what you mean. It's not an insult because it's very much focused on achieving one thing, and I don't think it overstays its welcome.
yeah.
Which I
What would
appreciate again. In
this is
climate.
kind of pivot more broadly to dogs in movies. What else jumps out at you as like some of the better animal, or we could focus on dogs, like better dog performances in movies? The Thing is one that obviously gets mentioned, but like,
Yeah.
what are some other ones?
I mean, I'd
'Cause I
say
can't-
I think, was it the 90s 101 Dalmatian movie? They had a lot of
Oh, yeah.
impressive stuff
Oh
that
my
the dog was
God.
doing.
That's a movie though, I've said.
It is, but I mean, the dogs in that were quite impressive. They did all sorts of things. They had them do all sorts of tasks.
Yeah.
Good thing.
I was gonna. What was the other one I was gonna mention?
I'm a fan of Beethoven.
I know I saw those movies when I was a kid, but I don't remember them. Oh, I like the Homeward Bound movie. At least, at least the first one. That's a fun one because the dogs have a lot to do in that, and I like that they're just dubbed with human voices.
I think there was that time period where we had animal dubbed movies that went straight to VHS and whatnot, and they had some of them learned not to do it, but others would have the mouths actually move with the CGI at the time.
Yeah,
and
I hate that.
that was
you don't
maybe
need to.
just don't have them mouths.
They're communicating telepathically. Who cares?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think isn't Michael J. Fox in Homeward Bound? I think he is. He was definitely given it all in that movie. Homeward Bound: The Incredible Journey. Yes, Michael J. Fox. That's right. Plays Chance.
I was saying dog from Up. That's I like that dog. But he's animated, so it doesn't,
animated.
It doesn't count.
You know what I really don't like, and why I'm very glad this movie didn't do this. I mean, I don't think this movie works at all, even a little bit, if they do what a lot of modern movies do, and it's just have a fully CGI dog.
No way.
That would have been hard.
Yeah, that would have been terrible. That would have been super distracting the entire time.
Typically, only the high budget movies even attempt that, but yeah. Well,
what was the movie?
Right?
Well, there was Crypto, yeah, but he was just a fucking asshole.
Yes.
But there was also what's the movie with Harrison Ford?
Oh,
that came out too long ago.
All of the Wild.
The Jack London.
Yeah,
one.
Which just was like that's a CGI dog. I could tell. I could just tell it's not the same. I don't know. There's something soulless about it, where a lot of the times it just doesn't work.
The reality is obviously, because it's kind of the reason why I like bringing up Doug. It's like, well, I mean, obviously there is a way through animation that you can get people to connect with basically any kind of character, human or animal or alien or whatever. But it's kind of like what you get, and it's like, yeah, but when you're pushing it towards photorealism, like you're starting to get into territory that's incredibly difficult to execute on compared to Doug, where he's like a cartoon character, and it's like that makes it easier to connect with him, even though he's less real, which is kind of always interesting to think about when it comes to illustrations, animations in general. But yeah, if they had like a CG dog, it would just be no way it would work.
Well, it ruins the main reason you'd want to watch that movie, essentially,
which is a real dog doing it. Yeah, I want to see a real dog doing this stuff.
I don't see any of them fakey dogs. These fakey computer dogs.
Certainly not. There's Toto from The Wizard of Oz, probably maybe the most famous movie dog of all time. That's a good dog.
There's a movie called Kevo mentioned in the chat, a dog movie with Willem Dafoe. It's called Togo. And if you're familiar with Balto, the animated movie with Kevin Bacon from the 90s, Togo is Togo is like the live action story of like the second leg of that run, because that's a real like historic event where some sled dogs.
Serum run, right?
Yeah,
They
the
had to
gnome
get a
run.
serum to a town.
Yeah, they had to get some diphtheria vaccine or something to a sick town in Alaska, and so Willem Dafoe is the sled team guy, and he's got his husky or Malamute or whatever it is pulling the sled. They use a real dog for that, which is pretty good. You know, it was 2019, but it's
That's
a real
good.
dog, so good on them.
Wow. I don't know why. So like, I mean, I do know why so many high budget movies like that are just like, the dog's easier. We can get it to do more things, and it's like, okay, good luck with that. The funniest example of that difference, Fringy, you were talking about between expressiveness in animals is The Lion King, because
Yeah.
like I cannot get over how funny it is to see the stampede scene side by side with the 3D animated remake.
God, help me!
Where Simba just looks like he could not give a fuck
it's-
of a whole herd
Yeah,
of wildebeest.
but I guess the thing is, again, it's kind of crazy because it's like, dude, it's not like real lions aren't expressive. You guys seen the have you seen it was like a BBC it was a lion that was surrounded by about 20 hyenas that were trying to get him, and he was on the ropes, and then his lion brother comes along and scares all the hyenas away, and the two lions start to they essentially, they do what cats do, where they rub their heads against each other. It's like, yeah, I got you back, and it's like, dude, they're real animals. Like, they have emotions and they express those emotions. Like, why are we pretending like if it's going to be photorealistic, you have animals that just have these blank face stares?
Well, in the wildebeest stampede scene, in the in the animated one, they do the equivalent of a dolly zoom into Simba, right? And obviously his eyes get really big. Maybe the lion's eyes in real life can't do that, but his ears go back because that's what they do when they get scared.
What cats do, yeah.
What dogs do. And then in the Lion King 2019, they don't even do that, and it's like,
the fact that they play the heroic music when Mufasa comes in, it's like, this is not a triumphant moment. This is like a disaster. Why are we playing like as if it's fucking Avengers? God.
Yeah.
And that new one made so much money, and so many people are, Sonic 3 demolished it. No, it fucking didn't. It didn't happen. Mufasa made like $800 million.
Oh,
Jesus Christ.
It is a damn shame. Between that and Lilo and Stitch, it's hard to know what the biggest butchering is.
Oh, yeah, no, but Snow White fell, so they're
going
going to stop making these movies. Come on. Who are you kidding? Yeah, it made $723 million. Mufasa was more successful than Superman 2025.
Fuck.
Look, guys.
Jeez. Oh, no.
It's in this media climate that even if I don't love this movie, I'm so glad things like Good Boy are coming out and that people are giving them attention at all. This movie
like
might
this and Weapons and some neat movies like that.
The fact that Good Boy might only make like $5 million in the theater or something like that, and it's like, but it was made for a lot less than that, so that's really good. Like, I mean, it certainly helps that this has a very appealing premise to a wide audience of people. First of all, supernatural horror, or at least the sort of the facade of spooky supernatural things happening in a house. Horror that's evergreen, that will always be popular. It doesn't really fade away like other subgenres of horror do, like Hostel and Saw. Like, that had a wave and fell away, but supernatural horrors be here forever, baby. And the fact that there's a cute dog the whole time. Like, I remember when they announced this movie, like that it was going to premiere at whatever film festival, like I saw all sorts of comments from people like, where's the trailer? Where's the trailer? When can I see it? When can I see it? Like, people were chomping at the bit for a movie like this. And it's almost funny that we haven't done this before, really. It seems like the kind of idea that you go, wait, this is the first one? Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I guess
the word of mouth has been quite positive.
Yes.
Yeah. It's though again, because I was just thinking about when you're talking about like Life of Chuck only made $16 million.
Yeah,
these movies kind of like struggle even when they. To be fair, I've not seen many people talking about Life of Chuck, unfortunately, which is it's very annoying because it's a really good movie. That's Flanagan's new movie, so I would recommend it. I would definitely recommend it. You should watch that. But I guess it's tying into that point of like, yeah, even when you got these films and it's like, man, they're made for cheap, but even then, like, the amount of money that they're able to make is almost like surprising compared to, like, for instance, a lot of Blumhouse movies where they cost nothing and it's like, oh, made $300 million. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There are things about Good Boy that give me hope, because this is exactly where I think a future like indie film renaissance could go.
Sure.
Because there's been a lot of, shakeups, and sort of the ground is shifting beneath the feet of Hollywood, right? And one of the things that's happening among many is that star power isn't really what it used to be, unless you're someone like Tom Cruise, maybe Brad
And
Pitt,
even
people
then,
like that.
Yeah,
And even then,
even
right?
then.
you know,
And
the most
you
recent
might
Mission
look at
Impossible didn't do great, from what I remember.
no.
and
Well,
F-
they also
F1
spent $400 million on it, so of course it did.
F1 cost about 200-300 million, so like I don't know if that film was profitable. To be fair, that film
Yeah.
doesn't have as much of an incentive to be, because it's basically a big commercial for Formula One, and if you get even a small number of people who watch the film to buy like a weekend ticket to whatever Grand Prix they want to go to, like, you will make that money back easy. So
and that's certainly gaining popularity. F1 is in the States,
in America, yeah, it's yeah, it is.
But there's a downside, obviously, to star power not being able to carry movies anymore, and I think part of the reason that, like, because the Life of Chuck, has what's his name in it? Does it have a lot of other famous people?
It has a lot of I'd say it's like it's decently stacked, because you got Tom Hiddleston, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Karen Gillan, they're in that. Mark Hamill's in it. It's got a good number of people, but like it's like, but 16 million. It's like not many people have seen that film.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors here, so I don't want to make it seem like it's all one thing. There's the decline in star power, right? There's the fact that this movie is like I think I looked it up, as like 20. Life of Chuck is like 25 million, which is cheaper, right? Like Superman was 225 million, so that's considerably cheaper. And I don't know what their market. It doesn't seem like they marketed the Life of Chuck much at all. That's obviously a huge component. Like, you just cannot get away with not marketing your movie these days. Like, you can't just rely on good word of mouth.
There's too much stuff coming out. It just gets buried in all of the media that's being released.
Too many things competing for people's attention. I've made this example before, but I think it's really relevant. Is that, and I don't know if I have the numbers quite memorized, but Anora, which won Best Picture last year, that was a movie that cost $6 million to make. Now, most people,
that only cost $6 million.
Yes, it only cost $6 million. They did it non-union. People worked at scale because they wanted to work with this director. They shot a lot on locations. They used their money really well in that movie, right? And but what's interesting is that they, the rule of thumb is often that you spend 100% of your production budget on marketing, or at least 70 to 80%. So, another $6 million on marketing. But they spent $18 million on marketing for Anora. And it paid off. Yes, they did. They spent way more marketing it than they did on the movie itself, and it worked. The movie was a success.
It was
if you don't tell people your stuff exists, then
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So obviously, a movie like Good Boy gets good word of mouth because of its premise and its inherent appeal. But I did see some marketing for it. I think is this distributed by, it's like IFC Films or Shudder or something like that, right? Shudder puts their movies in theaters, which a lot of other indie horror distributors don't. So that certainly helps, right? But like,
why wouldn't you? What would be the reason against it?
Well, because
so I mean, if you buy, you're the production company, you're the the streaming company, whoever who's buying the film, and you're like, spending, I don't know, how much would you think, like maybe 100,000 or something on a small independent movie? It's going to cost a lot to get it out to a bunch of different theaters, or you could slap it on your streaming service for like a $5.99 rental fee and get people like that. So you're probably just sort of playing numbers at that point, I think, for the most part.
There are upfront, yes to that. Also, there are upfront costs for theatrical distribution, and basically, if you want to make, so you have to like make the DCPs and get them to all the theaters, etc. And and you only get so much of the return on that. Obviously, it's a good idea to do
with the theater owners.
Yeah, but you have to. I think the big thing is that you're basically locked into spending a certain amount of money on marketing. And if whoever's buying this just to dump it on Tubi or something like that doesn't feel like spending that money on marketing, then they're not going to do that.
And they may not even have it, right? Like they just get it to put it, like, to sell a subscription, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's wise that Shudder and IFC, they put their horror movies in theaters. You know, they put When Evil Lurks, they put Late Night with the Devil. These kind of movies that they make, they put them in theaters, even if it's like a limited release. Maybe you have to drive a little further to see it. At least it's there, right?
Yeah,
but
people
I think
heard
overall
of him because of that, right? Like that's one of the really nice things about this. Like this movie, everybody that I talked to, you know, a bunch of people in the office that I work in, all knew this movie, right? Like, even though it's pretty small. So
yeah, so one of the things that the reason this gives me hope for the future of indie filmmaking is I think this is a good model of how you can succeed in today's climate. And there's a multi-pronged approach, right? You pick a genre that people will always want to see, right? You give the people what they want, essentially. And then the doggo element is just really smart. Like I said, I can't believe that this hasn't really been done like this already. You know, this is something
I can't, but I can. That's the thing. I also can, because it's a little bit. It's decently creative in and of itself.
Yeah. Oh, certainly.
Kind of in the same way that you know, it should be the case that a film like Flow probably should have been made before, but it's like, yeah, but at the same time, I can believe in a climate that releases the kind of films that it does and this many sequels and that just suck. I can totally believe that a pretty obvious cool idea can just be overlooked for, like, you know, 50 years.
It certainly, yes, I agree with that. And I wouldn't want to diminish the originality of the idea. It is a good idea. It's not like I came up with it, right? So I wouldn't want to take that away from them or anything. Though I would say, like, this is the kind of unique, creative, like, mass appeal, or at least, you know, it would appeal to a lot of people, especially horror fans.
You know, you got a good dog as a protagonist. Everybody likes that.
I'm surprised it didn't get made sooner, because this is a cheap premise. You don't really need a lot of money. I think it's hard to find a good budget information, but if the AI overview, whatever it's sourcing here, is right, and it costs $2 million, it's like, that is kind of the way forward, I think, especially because you don't need all these famous actors. They're not going to sell your movie anyway. Like, you need good marketing, and you need a premise and a genre that people go, okay, I know what to expect from that kind of movie. If you have a movie like Eddington or something from Ari Aster, where it's like, okay, well, he made horror movies before, but this doesn't really look like a horror movie. I don't really know what this is. It doesn't matter that Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pascal are in it. You're like, I don't know what this is, though. It doesn't. Like,
$25 million. It's like, all right, yeah. Well, it's kind of One Battle After Another is incredibly expensive. Like,
oh god, yes, 130 million.
Which you can kind of see that it is expensive. It's like, dude, that's expensive. Like, for this movie, like, are you sure you're going to make that money back? And it looks like the answer is going to be no.
No, a hard no. How long has it been out? Like, maybe 2 weeks at this point.
It's been out for a couple of weeks, yeah. So
it made no way. The low estimate of what it cost at the theaters, and that's it. So that's really bad. That's really bad.
That's not good.
Especially when if it's a Warner Brothers movie, it's not like they can even sell it to a streaming service, because it's their own streaming service. You know what I mean? Like,
no, that's true. It'll just be putting it on, you know, HBO Max is like, that's interesting that will be like their first. Well, they're set. You know, it's because I've had a good year this year. It's to the point that now people want to buy Warner Brothers.
Yes.
So I'm sure David Zaslav is thrilled. Everybody was shitting on him, but now he's probably making a whole bunch of money. Which is kind of awkward to me that everybody is sort of celebrated, like, oh yeah, Warner Brothers. Yeah, it's like, I thought we all didn't like this guy.
They changed their strategy specifically because everyone turned on them. So, you know, they got a lot of bad press for two main things, which was shelving indefinitely and never showing Batgirl and Coyote versus Acme, right? They eventually sold Coyote versus Acme to someone else. That ever come
We'll see how well that one does when it comes out.
It's still coming, yeah.
Because
Gotcha.
if
So
that one comes out and it fails, that's definitely going to be a case of like, well, guys, come on. Like, you have to show up for these movies.
yeah. So they got a lot of bad press, especially the basic takeaway for a lot of people was, oh, that's a pretty terrible thing to do to the creators of these movies. Like, you know what I mean? Like and they released so many other bad movies that it's like, really, how bad could this have been?
Yeah, like,
Really?
could it really have damaged it that much? Yeah.
I'm not so sure it could. But so they earned a really bad reputation, especially for being anti-creator.
Anti-creator, which is pretty bad
Yes.
if you want creators to work for your company.
And so what did they do? They were like, okay, find all the auteurs who have done reasonably well recently, let them do whatever they want. And they did that. They gave $90 million for Ryan Coogler to do Sinners. They gave like $25 to $30 million for Zach Kreger, who's not even really a big name. He just made Barbarian, and that did well. That's a lot of money for Weapons, honestly, and it shows. It's a pretty star-studded movie.
It's a well-produced film, and it was very successful. But then again, isn't it funny that Final Destination Bloodlines is more successful than Sinners? It is. It costs less, but it made about as much money. So
certainly, that was going to be a big hit.
This is what I mean. These conversations about, like if you were on Twitter, you'd think Sinners was the biggest movie of the year, and then you find out it's like, oh, I mean, you did okay. Yeah, did all right.
Yeah. Sure. But one battle after another is another part of that. $130 million for this movie.
Money.
That's too much for this. Like they really tried to make it seem like this is going to be a star-studded, action-packed movie, and we're just going to not really talk too much about how it's about left-wing terrorism. We're going to not really tell people that, because maybe people wouldn't be interested when we're promoting it on Good Day America and stuff like that. We'll talk about PTA, he's great, and this division. Wow, you want to see it on the biggest screen possible? You like Leonardo DiCaprio, don't you? I mean, I know Leo's he is a great actor, and he is good in the movie, but I don't know if that's going to really sell it, and it didn't sell it. I mean, we know that now.
Well, the thing is that those kinds of it really just does seem like those kinds of films. Because, 20 years ago, you're in a position where you could have... It's just when you look at the most successful films that came out in the 90s, 80s, 70s in any given year, it's like you've got a very healthy mix of different kinds of movies. There used to be a time when you had relatively big budget films that weren't action movies or superhero movies. They were just relatively big budget, but they were dramas or comedies. Those don't really exist anymore. It is kind of like a strange ecosystem that exists now where... a film like Good Boy has always sort of been well poised to be successful because there's, it's always been the case that horror movies that are made with barely any budget have been in a position to make massive returns. Saw made like 100 times its return on investment. But I guess it's interesting that like that starts to become a path that is now not only kind of the case for horror movies, but is also the case for, something like Anora, which is like more of a comedy drama movie. It's like, spend very little money to give yourself a better chance of actually making some kind of return on investment and essentially be happy with the return that you get. The era where you're able to turn that into like a massive, massive, massive return, it's like, this is always going to be tricky. But if you can at least make enough money to justify making more films, then, that's like a path forward.
Then you did it.
Yeah. So if you're curious, this movie's made almost $5 million in its couple of weeks.
Which means it's definitely profitable.
It's made a profit for sure. Yeah. Even if it was at $2 million for the budget at its like highest end, which I don't.
There's no way. There's no way. It's got to be less than $1 million.
If they spent $2 million, they spent it in the wrong places. Yeah. That catering must have been really good because I'm not seeing $2 million on the screen.
Steak and lobster like every day.
Yeah. The other thing that's kind of funny here is like that Hollywood just seems intent on not learning as a lesson is that like the most profitable movie of all time, which is Paranormal Activity, only made $193 million at the box office.
It's not about how big the total number is at the box office. It's about how much you made relative to how much you spent.
To make in a few.
Well, I'm pretty sure we mentioned this yesterday, but it's very annoying seeing those tweets from just sort of the normal accounts tweeting about the news of like, X movie has made this much money, budget was this. And like a lot of the time, it seems like people think, oh, big number, that's good. But it's like, it really is the return on investment, opportunity cost. How much money do you know, could you spend $200 million on one movie that makes $600 million, which means you probably didn't turn a profit on that film? Or would it be better to split that $200 million across 4 movies that collectively make like $1.2 billion? Yeah, all of them made less money in total, but their return on investment was way higher.
The line I always come back to is from the Red Letter Media video about the Ben-Hur reboot.
Oh, God.
Which cost, I think, at the time, $100 million. And Mike goes like, they could have made $101 million movies.
Exactly.
Made 10 times their money back.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
I think it cost more than that, actually. Hold on.
I'm sure it did.
About 100 million. Yeah, it did. It's but yeah, it made $94 million. Nice.
Just what the world needs, a Ben-Hur remake. They've been screaming for that.
Jay, are you sitting down for this? The Ben-Hur remake. It's a total flop. What?
What?
How could this have happened? Yeah, there's a lesson in Good Boy. And I think it's give people what they want. Don't spend too much money because no one really cares if there's some bad CGI. People will forgive it.
A good premise, something interesting, some good spooky atmosphere.
Yeah,
I think that stuff goes. It goes a long way.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
People do show up for this Conjuring stuff, though. So
well, yeah,
because oh my god, how well is that doing right now for Last Rites? About $500 million.
Well.
It's about made $500 million. How do people? I'm sorry, man. People said Superman was so fucking successful. How do they square this away when it's like, yeah, but look at how much more successful, even by your own metric, these other films are. I don't get it. Where are all the tweets talking about how The Conjuring has done so well? It won't be the last one. Don't you worry.
No.
Not with that. It's the most successful film in the series.
As long as these shitty movies continue to just print money, and people go to see them in droves, they'll keep making them. They're not going to say no. They'll just become this established trend until they eventually peter out one day, which hopefully is sooner rather than later, but I doubt it.
If you're a cynical businessman who doesn't care about giving people quality horror movies, the lesson you could take from the Conjuring franchise's success is that if you did the same thing, but you didn't bother getting any famous people in it and made it for about a fraction, like, half or even a quarter of what those movies are made for, but importantly, you spent the same amount of money on marketing that those films do, you would be fucking rolling in it. Right?
Yeah.
Those films don't need to be good. They just need to be people walking around dingy rooms for a while until something goes ooga booga. And you don't really need Vera Farmiga or Patrick, whatever his name is,
Wilson.
Yeah. Maybe that's helping you a little bit at the box office, but not really. You could make the Conjuring movies for so much cheaper than they do and spend the same amount on marketing and be making even more money than they're making. So if you have, a couple $1 million and you want to make a lot of money, make some cheap jump scare supernatural horror movies.
Yeah, make it 2.5 hours, have 3 events occur, save a lot of money, just film the inside of the house for 80% of the movie, and boom, you're good.
Put a CGI nun in the corner. Promise it's coming later.
Oh, we love CGI nuns. Gotta have those.
So yeah, this movie gives me hope. I would like to see more from this guy. I hope he can do something like this and maybe even improve and do something with even better in the future. And I hope to see more movies like this. So
yeah.
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't mind if he gave his dog some real robust material here. Let's get him a nice role. Get him going.
Get him another movie, make him a star.
Honestly,
I'd be up for it.
The whole franchise around this dog. Well, I mean, maybe not franchise because this. I don't know how much you can add to the world building in this, but you just give other star vehicles for this dog in particular. I'd watch that.
Yeah, give him like an adventure movie next one. Something. I would like to see more of this dog. I was impressed by the dog's acting. He's a handsome dog.
Yeah, he really is.
That would be fun. That's actually what I would do if I were this filmmaker.
I think it's a good idea
100%.
because then you can tap into sort of the goodwill that's generated by this film and the fondness that people will have for it who watched it to be like, yeah. That'd be cool. But yeah, I mean, I would be interested in seeing what this guy does next because I think that it's kind of what I was saying at the beginning. I think that this is for a first film, like relatively well executed.
Oh yeah, this is
not
very
without its
impressive for a
flaws for
first
sure.
film.
What I hope he doesn't do is do a Good Boy 2.
No, I don't need that. I don't need that.
The story's done. Don't succumb.
Story's complete.
Have him fight a real monster this time.
Like
that might be
Hassan.
fun. Like,
Yeah, capitalize off of that.
Well, anyway, unless you had any more to say about it.
No, it's good timing. I was kind of having to. I gotta pretty much hop out about now. So,
Well, I appreciate
it
you
worked out
joining
pretty
us.
well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. For
Yeah, well,
joining
thanks
us.
for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
You bet. Yeah, it's a neat movie. It's there's a lot of good stuff in here, things to talk about.
Hopefully,
I
nice
enjoyed it.
break from
More
the
of
Tron binge that you all participated in the other day.
Well, Tron's gone. That's flushed.
Tron's gone.
Tron Ares, that is. Tron Ares is flushed. I'll never think about that movie again.
Nope.
Well, thanks for joining us in the chat and for your fine contributions and for the super chats. We really appreciate it. Nice, short, punchy stream today. We'll see you next week for another horror movie because it's October after all.
Spooky way.
Hooray.
All spooky all month. So I don't know what it'll be yet, but you'll find out when we tell you. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye, friends.
Bye.
See you later,
Bye.
everybody. Bye. Bye. Bye.